putting the U in Wireshark's GUI. Let's begin. A graphical user interface is a fantastic way to interact with software. And I remember back in the 90s when graphical user interfaces like Windows were becoming more and more popular. One of my friends back then, whose name was Steve, said, "Keith, check it out, this new version of Windows. All you got to do is click until it works." I thought that's great. There's a lot of truth to that, but wouldn't it be even better to know exactly what to click and what options were available? Inside of Wireshark, there are some terrific options. It's important for you and I to both know the layout of the graphical user interface. So our goal in this nugget is to describe and use the following: the main menu, the main toolbar, which is really a critical area inside of Wireshark, the display filter area when we sorted based on just ARP type of protocol. We also have three panes that are really important: the packet list, the packet details, the packet bytes, and there's also a status bar at the bottom. I absolutely want you to be comfortable with where those areas are inside of the interface. That way, if somebody is talking with you about Wireshark and they say, "Oh yeah, just go to the details pane," you'll know exactly what they're talking about. Now, besides just being a tour guide and saying, "This is this and that is that," we'll also do some live demonstration together as we go through and we leverage some of those areas and some of those features in the graphical user interface. I also want to give you a little peek into setting up some of the preferences that might suit you as you start working with Wireshark. Here is the graphical user interface of Wireshark. We're currently, in this example, looking at the Quick Start Capture. Now, if you downloaded that from the Nugget Lab area, or you have your own capture file that you want to reopen, how do you do that? Well, there's two basic methods. One, you can go to File and say, "I want to open a capture file," navigate to it and open it, or you could go ahead and use this icon right here from the main toolbar. Either of those methods would allow you to go and reopen a saved capture file. So what are the common names for the areas inside of Wireshark? I'm glad you asked. Here they are. Across the top, we have these drop-down menus: the file, the edit, view, etc. That's the main menu. Then below that, this row right here, that's the main toolbar. Simply a lot of the same functions that you can get from the main menu, but they put icons right there because they're frequently used and very easy to go ahead and click. With one click, you can go ahead and launch that feature. Then below that, we have the display filter area. For example, if we wanted to set up a display filter and we're looking for only the ARP protocol, we can type in ARP there, click on apply or press enter, either way. And then down here in the packet list pane, it would only show us those packets that involve the ARP protocol. If we wanted to drill down further into a packet, when we select a packet, for example, here we have packet number 6. Once we select that, down here in the packet details pane, it's going to show us the individual details regarding that information. And we can click on the plus symbol to expand any of those aspects. Now, one of the things I want to discuss with you right now is the difference between segments, packets, frames. A segment, a packet, and a frame. What exactly are those? The answer to that depends on which layer or which level of the protocol stack are we referring to. For example, in a common representation of the TCP/IP protocol suite that we know and accept today, we often have the physical layer at the very bottom, then we have the data link layer, and then we have the network layer, and then we have transport, and then above that, we have the application layer. And this representation of the TCP/IP protocol stack is extremely common as people discuss it today. As traffic gets encapsulated, let's say, for example, somebody's using a browser and they're using HTTP. As that data gets encapsulated at the transport layer, at that layer with the TCP header intact, that would be considered by some a segment of data. As it goes down and continues encapsulation and gets its IP header, the source and destination addresses added to that information, that's often referred to as a packet. All that data, including the IP header. And then as it goes even further down the protocol stack and it gets encapsulated and includes now the header for layer 2, which on Ethernet would be a source and destination MAC address and other details, that would sometimes be referred to as a frame of data. So one of our challenges as we collect this information with the protocol analyzer is, okay, what exactly is this? Number 9 represents this information, but what is it? I mean, because it includes the layer 2 information, which we referred to as a frame. It includes the layer 3 header, which we referred to as a packet. It also includes the layer 4 information, if we have a layer 4 protocol, that we could refer to as a segment. So I guess the question we have is, what do we call this data? Up here I call this the packet list pane, but each of these really represents the layer 2 information, the layer 3 information, and the layer 4 information. So we're generically, if you will, referring to these as packets in a general sense. So if you highlight a frame up here or a packet up here, for example, number 7, down here in the packet detail pane, it's going to show us the individual details for all of that information, including layer 2 information, layer 3 information, layer 4 information that we can expand and look at in the details pane right here. We also have the packet bytes pane. If we want to see the details in hexadecimal and ASCII, we can see that here as well in the packet bytes pane. And the cool thing is, when we highlight a section in the details pane, it'll automatically highlight that same area inside of the bytes pane. And at the very bottom, we have a status bar, and the status bar is identifying how many packets are in this capture file and, at the moment, how many we're looking at. For example, if we did a filter and said, I just want to look for ARP protocol packets, and let's say 2 came up, because that's what would be the case inside of this capture file. Down here, it would say packets are 1170, but displayed are 2, if that's what matched our display filter. So let's do a pop quiz. What I like to ask is really simple, and that is, what are the names of these 7 areas? Right here, 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 and here. One technique that we could use to help remember these areas is to simply write them down. There's something magical about writing things down that helps us remember them better. Even if we never go back to that piece of paper again, the writing it down is going to help us remember it longer than if we didn't write it down. So let's go on a road trip together. Let's go ahead and launch Wireshark. If you previously installed it and you pinned it to your taskbar, like I have, that's where you'll find it. Otherwise, you may have a shortcut in your desktop, or you can go to your start menu to find it if you're not running Windows 8. Windows 8, there's no start menu. Any way you want to launch it is absolutely fine. If you want to open up a capture file that you previously created, or if you downloaded the one from our nugget on getting started with Wireshark, if you downloaded that and want to open it, you can simply go to File, click on Open, navigate for it, and go get it. Or you can go ahead and click on the icon right here for Open a Capture File and navigate to it that way. Simply 2 different options for opening the capture file. Let's go ahead and use this link right here. And here's our capture file. Now, sometimes what I've noticed is these columns are sometimes overlapping. They're not really the perfect width. Let's take a look at how some of these features might help us. This option on the far left is if we wanted to list our available interfaces for capturing. So it brings up the pop-up showing us all the interfaces. In this case, I only have a single interface. And if I wanted to start capturing, I click on the Start button. This next icon on the main toolbar is Capture Options. If we select that, it brings us a pop-up or we can specify what we want our default interface to be for capturing traffic. We can also specify that, you know what, I want to use multiple files. I want to go ahead and when a file reaches 1 megabyte, I want to roll over to a new file and then another one and another one. We can also specify details of when we should stop automatically capturing. For example, once we reach 5 minutes of capturing, go ahead and stop the capture. And that might be a very good thing, or maybe even stopping it after so many packets. So we could say after we have 1,000 packets, go ahead and stop the capture. So in this case, if it's 1,000 packets or 5 minutes, whichever comes first, the capture will go ahead and be stopped. I'm going to go ahead and take those off because I want to control when that capture stops manually in my demonstrations. I also do not want to use multiple files, so I'm going to take that off as well. By default, it's going to update the list of packets in real time. It's also going to do scrolling, and that can be a little weird as well, especially if we have thousands and thousands of packets that are all pouring in. Wireshark's trying to display them all. That may or may not be a perfect thing for you, so you can control that right here. There's also some options for name resolution. So for example, if we scroll down a little bit and we grab an HTTP packet right here, this is from our host to that web server. If we take a look at the layer 2 addresses by expanding in the details pane here, how did it know that this destination MAC address right here was Cisco and that the source MAC address was Intel? How did it know? And the answer is the first 24 bits, which equates to the first 6 hex characters, are assigned to individual vendors. So all Wireshark did was it looked at those first 24 bits or 6 characters and said, oh, those are assigned to Cisco for this one, C47D4F. And it also looked at 08D40C and said, oh, those are assigned to Intel. It was doing effectively resolution based on that unique identifier, the first 24 bits, to the right vendor. So it's Wireshark, the software, that says, oh, I know who that is, and it's inserting the name. And that's the resolution regarding layer 2 addresses. That's an option that we can turn on or turn off in Wireshark. And by default, it is on. And that is exactly why we're seeing it. So if we didn't want it to do the name resolution during a capture, we can go ahead and deselect that, and it wouldn't bother doing that extra little step. So these are all referring to our capture options. If we wanted to start capturing, we click on Start, and everything we have set right here would be applied to our new capture that we're beginning. We already have a capture file we're looking at, so we'll go ahead and click on Close. But those are some of the capture options that we have. This little guy right here is simply going to allow us to start a brand new live capture. Once a capture is running, this icon right here is going to go ahead and stop the live capture. And if we were running a live capture and we had paused it, we could resume it with the Restart Running Live Capture icon right here. The folder represents opening a capture file. This represents saving a capture file. So we've captured some data, we want to save it to a file. That's how we could do it. If we were done looking at this capture file, we could close it with the X. We could reload this capture file that we're currently looking at. We have some printing options that we'll take a look at in a future video. If we want to find a specific packet, we can use the magnifying glass. For example, if we wanted to go ahead and go right to any packets that involved ARP, we can go ahead and click on Find. And it's not being applied as a display filter, but it does take us to the first ARP packet, which is packet 25. So it's automatically selected here in the list pane, and the detail pane here is showing us the details for that packet as well. This next option is really cool. Let's say, for example, that I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. We're looking at packet 1, and then after doing some other searching, we go to packet, let's go to 50, and then we go to, let's say, 100 just for good numbers, and then let's go to 200. So those are the packets of interest that we were looking at, and then we wanted to backtrack, say, oh, what was that packet? Here's the backspace. So take a look at the packet. We're at currently 200. If I click on the previous packet, it takes us back to 100, and then previous again back to 50, previous again back to 1, and I can also go forward as well. So it remembers the history of the packets that we were looking at, which makes it really handy when you have a few 100,000 packets and you're trying to find and go back and forth between a couple. The back and forth options are great. Another really handy option is, let's say that you know that the packet you want to look at is packet 1100. Now, how do you get there? Well, we could scroll down till we get to 1100, or we could use this jump to feature. So if we click on the go to packet with number icon, and then click on 1100, for example, if that's the packet we want to see, click on jump to, it'll take us right there. So it automatically jumps to packet 1100 in the packet list, and it also shows us the details for that packet in the packet details pane. If we want to go to the very top of our capture file, you simply click on go to first packet. And if you want to go to the very last one, it's this option right here, go to the last packet. This option right here says, do you want to colorize the output, yes or no? Now, if you do not like the colors, you want to see nothing but black and white, you simply click that and it toggles it. So there's no more color coding. The details for color coding are right over here, by the way. We'll get to that in just a moment. For me, I love the color coding, so I'm going to leave that on. Our next icon right here is to whether or not we want to auto scroll when we're doing a live capture. So if you want auto scroll on, that's great. So the data is just flowing across your screen. And if you want to pause it for some reason, you can toggle it on and off using this icon right here. So with the blue background, it is on. If I click it, it'll be off, and click it back on, it just toggles back on and off and on and off. So the capture will still be going, except it won't be scrolling across your screen. It'll give you an opportunity to stop for a moment and look at specific data that you want to look at. Another handy feature is the zoom in and zoom out. So if the font is really, really small, you want it bigger, you can zoom in, that's great. And the zoom out does the inverse of that, makes things appear a little bit smaller. So if you get out of control with the zoom in or zoom out and you just want to go back to what it was originally, this option right here, the zoom 100%, is your friend. It'll take you right back to a 100% zoom, which is no zoom in, no zoom out, the way it was originally. Now, occasionally, we're going to have columns that are not quite wide enough. For example, this top packet right here, it's IPv6. And the source address, the destination address, the source address is too long. It's not showing all the details in this column. It's just too long. We can fix that by manually dragging this column over, or we could use this option right here, which is resize all columns. One click, and it will auto size it to the maximum width for any field. And that makes it very convenient if you want to see that data right up here. The next icon on the toolbar is setting up a capture filter. Now there's two major categories of filters. A capture filter says what's going to make it into Wireshark. So if you say, I only want to see ARP, and that's your capture filter, you'd only be collecting ARP related packets. Nothing else would make it in. The difference between setting up a capture filter and a display filter, which is this guy right here, this is a display filter, is that we can capture a large quantity of data and then simply sift through the results with a display filter, so it's only showing us the details that we want. We can clear that display filter and still see all the content. So my mother told me when I was younger, she said, take a jacket, you can always take it off. Well, when you're capturing data, if you set up a capture filter and you do not collect certain packets that come in, you won't be able to analyze it later. So when practical or possible, based on the volume of packets you're looking at, it's normally better to set up a fairly generous capture filter to collect virtually everything that you might be interested in, and then you can always filter it later, the viewing of it, with a display filter. And our next option right here is to edit or apply a display filter, and there's an icon for it to get very creative with the display filters. We can also simply put information right here in the display filter area. Either way is great for controlling what's displayed to the screen regarding the packets collected. Our next icon here is the coloring rules. If we want to edit, for example, why in the world did it make, this one blue and this yellow and these green? What causes that? Well, the coloring rules are indeed what cause that. Of course, if we don't want the colors at all, you simply take it off. However, if they're on, the coloring rules are controlling what colors are going to show for what type of packets. So by clicking on that, we can notice some of the defaults here. So if it's black background with red text as bad TCP or a checksum error, either way, it would indicate that, hey, there's some kind of a problem. A black background with green text would be ICMP errors. Light blue is for ARP. And the list continues. We could scroll down and take a look at all of them. If we wanted to go in and edit, it'd be very easy to do. Simply highlight the one that you want to edit, click on edit, and you can specify the foreground font color, the background color to your heart's desire. For the moment, I'm going to go ahead and leave the defaults. Our second to last icon here on the toolbar is the edit preferences. So if you want to edit preferences, we can click on this, or we could go up here to edit and go to preferences. Either way would be perfectly great. So let's talk about a preference that I'm going to change right now inside of the Wireshark. I'm just using the defaults that came with it at the moment. If you'll notice in our capture file, quick start capture, is that we have a whole boatload of black background and red text, which implies some type of a problem. So let's grab packet 31. So I'll highlight packet 31, and it's showing me the details down here. And if I look at the red section, that's where the problem lies. So I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. And what this is saying is that I have a header checksum error for the IP protocol, and it says the header checksum of 0x0000 is incorrect. It should be hexadecimal D7E2. And it's also saying, hey, that might be caused by IP checksum offload. What the heck is that? Well, the offload function is when your computer says, you know what? My network interface card has the ability to calculate that for me. Why do it in software if my network card can do it? And Wireshark is actually collecting this before it literally hits the wire. So Wireshark effectively is seeing the data before the actual network interface card does those calculations and spits the bits at the physical layer onto the network. So if we know that to be the case, there's two ways of dealing with this. One, we could go ahead into our Windows 8 machine and turn off that offload feature, which is a possibility. Or second, we could tell Wireshark, hey, don't bother worrying about the checksum information and don't bother reporting on it. And what I'd like to do is show you how to set both of those options. First, let's go to Control Panel. For the details of this Ethernet interface on this Windows machine, I'm going to go to right click, go to Properties, and if I click on Configure, and then under Advanced, and this is where I could go ahead and tweak a few of the offload options. So here's a UDP checksum offload, a TCP checksum offload. Here's the IP version 4 checksum offload. So if we wanted to go to our PC and disable that, we could. But anytime we can do a feature in hardware, it's a lot more efficient than doing it in software. So I'm going to leave that option in place on the actual workstation. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and tell Wireshark to relax. So to tell Wireshark that you don't really care about that under Preferences. Now there's a lot of options in Preferences, but the one I want to focus on right now, sort of like a pet peeve, because I don't want to see those error messages, is we're going to go to Protocols, and there's a whole boatload of them here too. We're going to go down to IP version 4, which is right here. And on IP version 4, let's say that we do not want to validate the IPv4 checksum if possible. So by turning that feature off, we're just telling Wireshark to relax about that check. We'll click Apply, and I want you to notice in the background what happened. All those black backgrounds with the red where that problem was being flagged for us, those are now removed. So I'll click on OK, and that's a lot nicer on the eyes. Anytime you're looking at a packet capture file, and there's all these, black background with red text, which implies some type of an error or problem. If it really is a problem, we'd want to dig into that. If it's not really a problem, we want to go ahead and remove those false negatives, which is the case here. In this video, we've discussed and demonstrated a few of the graphical user interface areas inside of Wireshark. We also took a look at modifying one preference in Wireshark regarding checksums. So here, my friend, are your action items. These are really simple and very important. I'd like you to open up a capture file. It can be one that you created or one that you downloaded from the Nugget Lab area. And then once it's open, I want you to verify that you can describe each of the areas in the interface. The main menu, the toolbar, the filter area, the panes for packet list, details, and bytes, as well as the status bar, and then practice with them. Practice navigating and use them. If you want to go ahead and play this video again and then pause at each of the icons on the main toolbar that we tried, that would be a great opportunity for you to watch, learn, and conquer as we get comfortable with the interface of Wireshark. Once you've taken a few minutes and increased your comfort level with Wireshark, it'll then be time to proceed to the next video where we'll take it to the next level. I've had a great time. I'm so glad you joined me. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.